Welcome back. We are going to study now in our last session today. And I would encourage you not to miss tomorrow for the worship service, and also the 2 sessions in the afternoon, where we're going to study a little more in detail Daniel chapter 11 and verses 40 through Daniel 12, verse 3. And that, I'm sure, is going to be eye-opening, and you're going to see how that follows the same sequence as what we've been studying in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 12, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17. But that's in the Old Testament, centuries before. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Father in heaven, as we conclude our study today, we ask for your Holy Spirit to give us understanding in the rest of the study of Revelation 17. We thank you for the promise of your presence. We claim that promise with the certainty that you will fulfill it, because we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, we're to the section, the meaning of the number 10. We already noticed that the crisis for God's people is going to be global, right? The whole world. It's not only 10 kings somewhere or 10 rulers somewhere. All of the rulers of the world are going to unite against God's people. But it's represented by the number 10. Now, there are several texts that seem to indicate that the number 10 is a symbol for all or many. 10 camels, and you'll have to look up these verses. I didn't want to include a whole page of quotations additionally. 10 camels symbolize all of Abraham's goods. Genesis 24, verse 10. 10 servants are symbolic of all of Christ's professed servants, right? In the parables of Jesus, if there's 10 servants, so Jesus only has 10 servants? No, they symbolize all of his servants, all of his followers. That's Luke 19, verse 13. When Hannah could not bear children, her husband asked her if he was not better than 10 sons. Why 10 sons? He could have said then many sons, but 10 sons means a lot of sons. That's 1 Samuel 1, verse 8. 10 rulers of the city represent all of them. Ecclesiastes 7, verse 19. The vegan young men were 10 times better than all of the other students. How could you measure that they were 10 times better? It means that they were totally and completely better than all of the others. 10 virgins represent all of God's people. There's not only 5 faithful believers and 5 unfaithful ones. 10 is a round number for all of them. We return 10% of our income to God, and we are tithing what? All of our income. The 10 commandments contain all the duty of man. Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. In fact, Deuteronomy 5:22 says God added no more. And all the law and the prophets are summarized in what? In 10. The 10 horns are found on the head of the dragon of Revelation 12, the sea beast of Revelation 13, and the scarlet beast of Revelation 17. Each one of those heads has 10 horns. Whereas the 7 heads rule consecutively, the 10 horns rule at the same time. This is made clear by the fact that all 10 horns will rule simultaneously on the 7th head, correct? Yeah. With the sea beast when it resurrects from its deadly wound. All 10 are there. It says there are 10 kings. The final fulfillment of the feet and toes of the image is in Revelation 17. In other words, Daniel 2 gave us the sketch. Revelation 17 brings it all together. There, we once more encounter a dragon beast in Revelation 17 with 7 heads and 10 horns. The 10 horns are parallel to the 10 toes of the image in Daniel 2. the 10 horns of the sea beast in Revelation 17, and the 10 horns on the dragon-like beast in Daniel 7. 10 horns symbolize 10 kings. However, while the 10 horns in Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 represent the mingling of church and state in the nations of Europe during the 1260 years, the 10 horns in Revelation 17, with no time period attached, represent the period when the beast's deadly wound is healed by a renewed mingling of church and state in the future. In Revelation 17, the 10 horns have an expanded meaning and include the kings of the earth and the whole world. According to Revelation, and also according to the writings of Ellen White, the statements, the multiple statements that we read. These kings will not merely join hands with one another politically. It's not talking about a mere political union of all the kings of the earth. A religious power, no longer represented by the little horn or the sea beast, but as a harlot, will manipulate and use them for her own ends. Revelation 17 describes this great harlot sitting on many waters, fornicating with the kings of the earth, which is the same as the mingling of the iron and the clay, and inebriating them with her intoxicating wine. She has a blasphemous name and kills the saints of the Most High as she did in the past. This is the picture of the end-time apostate church that will go to bed with the kings of the world to establish what today is called the New World Order on earth, created by the power and prowess of man. That's the reason why Daniel 2 speaks about they come together by the seed of men. However, this union will not be a union at all in the sight of God, because it is an illegitimate union. Thus, Ellen White wrote, earthly powers are shaken. We need not and cannot expect union among the nations of the earth. Ellen White seems to be talking out of both sides of her mouth. Because she says that there will be no union, but there's a statement where she says, these have one mind, there will be a universal bond of union, a great harmony, a confederacy of Satan's forces. So is she talking out of both sides of her mouth? No. What she's saying is that the union at the end is not a real union, because it's an illegitimate union of the church with the state, which God does not recognize. So once again, this statement in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 361, earthly powers are shaken. We need not and cannot expect union. She's talking about true union among the nations of the earth. Our position in the image of Nebuchadnezzar is represented by the toes in a divided state and of a crumbling material that will not hold together. Is this coalition or union going to crumble to pieces? Is it going to fall? Because it's not true union at all. Let's use an analogy so that we can understand this. And I used this analogy early in our seminar. The whole world, the kings of the whole world, will be of one mind with the harlot, according to them. However, in the sight of God, there is no legitimate union at all. So in their sight, there's union. In the sight of God, there is no union. Now here's the example. When a married man commits adultery, is there union? Of course there's union. Is there a sexual union between the man and the woman? Yes. Is it a legitimate union? It's not a legitimate union. Does the harlot fornicate with the kings of the earth? In the sight of God, is that really union? In the sight of God, is that a union? No, that's an illegitimate union. So what Ellen White is saying is, because they are united illegitimately, the harlot, with the kings of the world, God does not recognize that as union. So it's union the way that God defines union. And I'm going to read again this statement from Volume 3 of Selected Messages 392. We read it in the previous class. The so-called Christian world is to be the theater of great and decisive actions. Men in authority, those are the politicians, right? Yes. Men in authority will enact laws controlling the conscience after the example of the papacy. Babylon will make all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Every nation, not only 10, every nation will be involved. And then she quotes Revelation 17 and 18. Of this time, John the Revelator declares, these, that is the men in authority in every nation, have one mind. There will be a universal bond of what? Union. One great what? Harmony. Is there going to be harmony for a while? Does God recognize this harmony? He doesn't recognize this harmony because it's illegitimate. It unites church and state. That's not union in the sight of God. It's like a man who goes outside his wedding vows and has sexual relations with a woman. There's union, but it's not recognized by God. So there will be a universal bond of union, one great harmony. For a while, is there going to be harmony and union? Sure. A confederacy of Satan's forces, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Thus is manifested the same arbitrary, oppressive power against religious liberty, freedom to worship God according to the dictates of conscience, as was manifested by the papacy when in the past, that's during the 1260 years, it persecuted those who dared to refuse to conform with the religious rites and ceremonies of Romanism. Now, let's notice the next section, a future global French Revolution. What gave the death blow to the papacy for the first time? It was France, right? Is there going to be another French-like revolution, but on a global scale? Yes, when the union falls apart, because it's not real union. Education 228. Notice what she says. At the same time, anarchy. Are we seeing a lot of anarchy in the U.S.? Have you seen what they're doing, for example, with the Tesla dealers? Seen that on the news? That's anarchy. What happened on January 6th? That's anarchy. But not only on January 6th, what happened during the Black Lives Matter riots. That's what you call anarchy. It's a refusal to live by the rule of law. At the same time, anarchy is seeking to sweep away all law. Not only divine, but human. The centralizing of wealth and power. Of course, we're not seeing that today. The wealth in the hands of a few. Do you know that that's what led to the French Revolution? One of the factors. The centralizing of wealth and power. The vast combinations for the enriching of the few at the expense of the many. The combinations of the poorer classes. This is labor unions, by the way. The combinations of the poorer classes for the defense of their interests and claims. The spirit of unrest, of riot, and bloodshed. Are we seeing this? Absolutely. The worldwide dissemination of the same teachings that led to the French Revolution. All are tending to involve the whole world in a struggle similar to that which convulsed France. Are you catching the picture? The world's going to be a jungle. And she ends by appealing to the youth to stand amidst such upheavals. She's talking about the youth, are now to lay the foundations of character. We are not to entertain our youth. We cannot entertain our youth better than the world. We can't compete with the world to give entertainment. But we can do much better than the world by establishing spiritual activities for the youth that attract their attention. Bible study, prayer, witnessing, mission projects, getting the youth involved. Jesus will then come as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And those who are with him are the called, chosen, and faithful. By the way, this everlasting kingdom will be established without hands. Daniel 2 says that. What does that mean, without hands? It means without human intervention. Because it will be established by Christ, not man. You know this whole thing about climate change? It's human beings trying to resolve the problem without God. This everlasting kingdom will be established without hands because it will be established by Christ, not man. The mirage of a new world order without the intervention of God is just that, an illusion. What politicians desire is to establish a new world order without the supernatural, otherworldly intervention of God. The kingdom that God will establish is not natural, but supernatural. Not from inside history, but from outside history. Not the result of an evolutionary progress, but a supernatural overturning of all human kingdoms. A new world order created by man will seem like the only hope of saving the planet from extinction. However, there will be a small remnant that will refuse to cooperate. In order to save the planet, the united powers of the earth will jail, starve, beat, and sentence them to death. This now seems like an impossibility. That's why Ellen White wrote in Great Controversy, page 607, "To human wisdom, all this now seems impossible. But as the restraining Spirit of God shall be withdrawn from men, and they shall be under the control of Satan, who hates the divine precepts, there will be strange developments. The heart can be very cruel when God's fear and love are removed." It's an awesome statement. Do you know she also has a statement in the book Great Controversy where she says that when probation closes, Satan will have full control of the finally impenitent. Can you imagine living in a world where Satan is in total control of the wicked? With the exception that God will not allow any of his people to perish. But they will have total control of the impenitent. The world will be a jungle. You know, I found this statement, this last statement that we have here, it's the last on my page. It's a chilling statement. The forces of darkness will unite with human agents. Who are the forces of darkness? Satan and his angels. The forces of darkness will unite with human agents who have been given over, who have given themselves into the control of Satan. And now listen carefully. And the same scenes that were exhibited at the trial, rejection, and crucifixion of Christ will be revived. We're going to go through the same experience that Jesus went through. And then she's going to explain why. Through yielding to satanic influences, men will be transformed into fiends. Do you know what a fiend is? A demon. And those who were created in the image of God, who were formed to honor and glorify their Creator, will become the habitation of dragons. And Satan will see in an apostate race his masterpiece of evil, men who reflect His own image. At the end time, God will have a people who fully reflect His image. And Satan will have his people that reflect fully his image. That's what the final battle is all about. Revelation chapter 17 presents the same amalgamation of iron and clay as Daniel 2, but with different symbols. It says there, then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, who sits on many waters. Why is she a harlot? Verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth, those are the waters, right? And the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now let's talk, as we continue our study, let's talk about the Tower of Babel. All of this reminds us of what happened in Genesis chapter 11 at Babel. What happened in the Babylonian Vale of Shinar will occur once more, but on a global scale. In other words, that's a type of what's going to happen globally at the end. Genesis describes a superficial unity of the Babel builders. After the flood, God had instructed them to what? To disperse, to fill the earth. But they desired to establish a global monarchy that would encircle the whole earth. In other words, a new world order, if you please. God Himself stated that they were united. But were they truly united in the sight of God? No. Let's read Genesis 11, verse 6. The people are one. This is God speaking. The people are one. See, the rebels, they were united. The people are one. And they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. I like the way Ellen White describes what their objective was. It's the same objective that the great men of the earth today have in mind. That is a global system controlled by a certain group of individuals that controls every aspect of life. This is what Ellen White wrote about the builders of Babel. God had directed man to disperse throughout the earth, to replenish and subdue it. But these Babel builders, determined to keep their community united in one body. So were they united? Were they? In the sight of God? No. And to found a what? A monarchy that should eventually embrace the whole earth. That's globalism. Thus, their city would become the metropolis of a universal empire. Its glory would command the admiration and homage of the world and render the founders illustrious. The magnificent tower, reaching to the heavens, was intended to stand as a monument of the power and wisdom of its builders, perpetuating their fame to the latest generations. It reminds us of Nebuchadnezzar. Isn't this great Babylon that I have built with my power and for my greatness? When the builders believed that their objectives were within reach, God intervened and the unity fell apart because it wasn't really unity. Is that going to happen in the end time with spiritual Babylon?
Yes.
Are they all going to come together on the same page? Yeah. In their sight, is it unity? No. Is it unity in the sight of God? No. Notice how Ellen White describes the demise of unity at the Tower of Babel. Confusion and dismay followed. All work came to a standstill. There could be no further what?
Harmony.
No further harmony or cooperation. All work came to a standstill, she says. The builders were wholly unable to account for the strange misunderstandings among them And in their rage, listen carefully, and in their rage and disappointment, they reproached one another. They were united before, and now they're fighting with one another. To what point? To what degree? Their confederacy ended in strife and bloodshed. Is that what's going to happen under the sixth plague? When the waters dry up? Are they going to turn on one another? The populace is going to turn on the religious leaders that deceive them? Yes. You see, the type of what Revelation describes is found in Genesis 11. So if the name Babel is in Genesis, you better make sure that you're going to study that story well in order to understand the end time Babel or the end time Babylon. I recommend that you read Patriarchs and Prophets 123 and 124, where Ellen White describes the Babel builders of today. She gives a whole list of what it means for the Babel builders to be building today. Revelation 17 tells us that the kings of the earth and the whole world will be of one mind. That is, on the same page until the words of God are fulfilled. And God's last word, as we mentioned before, is, "It is done," at the seventh plague. At that time, God will deliver his faithful people, and the wicked will turn on one another. When the words of God are fulfilled, Babylon united will become Babylon divided. Events similar to those at the Tower of Babel will occur, but on a global scale. Notice how Ellen White described the confusion at Babel when the unity was broken apart. Confusion and dismay followed. All work came to a standstill. There could be no further harmony or cooperation. The builders were wholly unable to account for the strange misunderstandings among them. And notice, in their rage and disappointment, they reproached one another. Their confederacy ended in strife and bloodshed. And then Ellen White concludes the statement that I read before, just before. She says, lightnings from heaven. By the way, the seventh plague, there's lightnings. Lightnings from heaven. As an evidence of God's displeasure. Was God displeased with this unity that they had? Yes. Let me ask you, was the iron and the clay united? In the sight of those who united it, yes. But two elements that should not go together is not really unity. She continues, the confederacy ended in strife and bloodshed. Lightnings from heaven, as an evidence of God's displeasure, broke off the upper portion of the tower and cast it to the ground. Men were made to feel that there is a God who rules in the heavens. God will have the final word. The kings of the earth and the whole world, allied with apostate Protestantism and the papacy, will influence the multitudes in their nations to enact and enforce a Sunday law. When this happens, the kings will be on the same page. Ellen White linked the arrogance of the Babel builders with the final Babylon. Notice how she compared that Babylon with the end-time Babylon. This statement is found in Patriarchs and Prophets 123 and 124. There are tower builders in our time. Infidels. That means people who have no faith. Infidels construct their theories from the supposed deductions of sciences and reject the revealed Word of God. They presume to pass sentence upon God's moral government. They despise His law and boast of the sufficiency of human reason. Then, because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, in other words, because they're not punished immediately, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. And now she's going to talk about the Christian world. She's going to make the comparison. In the professedly Christian world, many turn away from the plain teachings of the Bible and build up a creed from human speculations and pleasing fables. and they point to their tower as a way to climb up to heaven. Men hang with admiration upon the lips of eloquence, while it teaches that the transgressor shall not die, that salvation may be secured without obedience to the law of God. Is that happening in the world, in Protestantism today? Oh yeah. If the professed followers of Christ would accept God's standard, it would bring them into unity. But so long as human wisdom is exalted above His holy word, there will be divisions and dissension. The existing confusion of conflicting creeds and sects is fitly represented by the term Babylon, which prophecy applies to the world-loving churches of the last days. Now we're going to skip the next quotation because I read it twice. It says that they're going to be of one mind. There's going to be universal bond of union, one great harmony, a confederacy. Now there's the same thing that happened at Babel. The 10 kings, which we saw, are really a symbol of the kings of the earth and the whole world. The 10 kings will be kings with the beast, that is, with their followers, which are the waters, for 1 hour. And they will make war with the Lamb. How are they going to make war against Christ when they're all united to destroy God's people? It's not personally against God. Ellen White wrote, Volume 7 of the Testimonies, 183, as we approach the last crisis, it is a vital moment that harmony and unity exist among the Lord's instrumentalities. The world is filled with storm and war and variance. Yet under one head, the papal power, the people, see, the harlot is influencing the people, through the kings, by the way. The people will unite. So is there going to be a union of the wicked? Absolutely there's going to be a union, artificial union. It's going to fall apart. Will unite to oppose God, how? In the person of His witnesses. This union is cemented by the great apostate. The war will not be directly against God, but rather against God in the person of His people. By the way, does the devil fight against the kingdom of God invisibly through visible powers? God does the same thing with His church. Christ is invisible to our eyes, but He is working, right? Behind the scenes. So is Satan. Those who touch His people touch the apple of His eye. In Matthew 25, Jesus said to His faithful followers, in that you have done it unto one of these, the least my brethren, you have done it unto me. And to Saul of Tarsus He said, why do you persecute me? So the persecution is against Christ in the person of His witnesses. The glorious climax of this prophecy tells us that Jesus will overcome the kings of the earth and the whole world, because He is the King of kings and Lord of lords, and those who are allied with Jesus are called, chosen, and faithful. That's the good news. After the storm, the sun comes out, right? And that's what's going to happen at the end. Jesus will be the overcomer. Jesus will come into the furnace of the time of trouble that God's people are going through. Ellen White does speak about the furnace of the time of trouble in the chapter on the time of trouble in the Great Conference. And she says that God allows His people to go through the time of trouble, to go into the fire, to consume their earthliness, that the character of Christ might be perfectly reflected. And it's going to be the same as Daniel, who was cast into the lion's den. All of his enemies were on the same page with the king. Of course, they deceived the king. But who won in the end? It was Jesus Christ, who came into the lion's den. It says His angel delivered Him. It was Jesus also in Daniel chapter 6. Now, let's go to the next section of our study notes. We're nearing the end of this chapter. The kings of the earth and the whole world and their subjects will not always carry on a love affair with the harlot who controls them. At the voice of God, when God says it is done, they will realize too late that the harlot and her daughters have deceived them. Then the kings and their citizens who before supported the harlot will hate the harlot and turn against her. The political leaders will encourage the multitudes, their waters, in other words, to turn against the harlot and her daughters. The kings will hate her, and the waters will dry up on her. She will come to her end with none to help. A scene similar to the French Revolution will take place not in a country, but in the whole world. I already read the next statement of Ellen White where she describes these plagues. The fifth plague, darkness. The sixth plague, the drying up of the waters. And the seventh plague, where he says, it is done. Let's go to the statement in Great Controversy 656, the very next statement after the one that I'm skipping. This is when the inhabitants of the world, when the multitudes realize that they have been deceived. Once again, like the French Revolution, violence and bloodshed, not against God's people. At this point, God's people are safe. Now, it's the falling apart of this end-time confederacy. Great Controversy 656 says, the people see that they have been deluded. They accuse one another of having led them to destruction. But all unite in heaping their bitterest condemnation upon the ministers. I think that she's talking about Protestant ministers there, primarily. Unfaithful pastors have prophesied smooth things. They have led their hearers to make void the law of God and to persecute those who keep it holy. Now in their despair, these teachers confess before the world their work of deception. The multitudes. What are the multitudes symbolically? The waters. The multitudes are filled with fury. By the way, the waters that dried up at the Red Sea, they dried up for God's people to escape, but then the waters turned on the Egyptians. The same is going to happen at the end. The waters upon which the harlot sat, they will turn against her, as well as the kings. The multitudes are filled with fury. We are lost, they cry, and you are the cause of our ruin. And they turn upon the false shepherds. So the waters that dried up, they withdraw their support, and then they fall on her. The very ones that once admired them most will pronounce the most dreadful curses upon them. The very hands that once crowned them with laurels will be raised for their destruction. The swords which were to slay God's people are now employed to destroy their enemies. Everywhere there is strife and bloodshed. What do you think? Quite a description, isn't it? When the waters are going to dry up. And when the kings are going to say, we're not going to have a love affair with you anymore, O harlot. It's over. Now, this idea of the wicked supporting the harlot and then turning against her is a recurring theme in the Bible. Let's go through these. The princes used King Darius to advance their agenda, didn't they? Remember the story? They influenced the king to give a death decree basically against Daniel. Who did the lions eat? The princes. God's child wasn't eaten by the cats. The creators of the plot were. The weapons that they created for Daniel came against them. How about in the days of Esther? Haman prepared this plot to kill all the Jews. Who died in the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai? Haman. See, this is all through the Bible. The Jewish leadership used the power of Rome to condemn Christ. And then Rome in AD 70 came and destroyed them. The papacy used the power of the state during the 1260 years, and the state turned against the papacy in the French Revolution. Church members will turn against, we just read it, their religious leaders who incited them to persecute God's people. Is this a recurring pattern?
Yes.
The harlot who used the kings of the earth to support her agenda will turn on him. And after the millennium, this is our next point. After the millennium, the multitudes that Satan used against the faithful in the course of history will turn against him. By the way, we don't have time to talk about the story of Esther. That's a tremendous typological story. Ellen White says that the decree that will be given against God's people at the end will be very similar to the one in the days of Esther. Esther is a symbol of Christ because she intercedes for her people. And her intercession leads to their deliverance. It's an entirely typological story. I did an Anchor School of Theology several years ago. I don't remember which one it is, but I go through all of the typology of the story of Esther. It's amazing. You even have the investigative judgment there. You know, when Haman is preparing his plot, the King Darius, couldn't sleep at night. And so he says, bring me the records to see. I want to read about the history of Medo-Persia. And just so happens that of all the volumes he could have read, he reads about Mordecai delivering him from assassination. What a coincidence. An investigative judgment. Right? And so then he calls Haman, he says, it doesn't say the name, what should we do for someone who delivered the king from certain death, from being killed? Oh, Haman says, that's me. So he says, put him on the horse, on the king's horse, and ride him all through the city, and have them, bow before him. And the king says, do that for Mordecai. The tables are turned. Even the investigative judgment that absolves the righteous before their deliverance is revealed in the annals of Medo-Persia. Everything is there in that story. All of these stories are not only stories. They are types. Why do you suppose 3 angels came to Abraham before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? Coincidence, right? No. As it was in the days of Noah, so also will it be at the coming of the Son of Man. The mark of Cain is equivalent to the mark of the beast at the end. Was the conflict between Cain and Abel over worship?
Yeah.
Yes. Was it over obeying God as God had said? Yes. All these stories, not only of Genesis, but many in the Old Testament, are typological stories. They teach in history what is going to happen again. Now let's go to our final couple of pages here. The seven-headed dragon of Revelation 17 reminds us of a dragon-like creature called Leviathan. There are 3 key passages in the Old Testament that describe this seven-headed monster. Psalm 74, verses 10 through 14, Job 41, and Isaiah 27 and verse 1. And the New Testament also alludes to this persecuting sea creature, but it doesn't name it by name. It's the seven-headed dragon of Revelation chapter 12. And who is that seven-headed dragon in Revelation chapter 12? Well, we know that it's Rome tried to kill Christ, but who is behind the plot? Satan. So who is Leviathan? Leviathan, the seven-headed creature, is Satan. Now let's summarize the characteristics of Leviathan. He is a sea creature. Is In Revelation chapter 13, is this seven-headed beast a sea creature? Yes, he rises from the sea, right? And we know from Psalm 74 that Leviathan had multiple heads. It doesn't say how many. You have to go to Revelation for that. But we know that Leviathan had multiple heads. It says God crushes the heads of Leviathan. Leviathan is also called the fleeting serpent and the great dragon. Leviathan is called what? The fleeting serpent and the dragon. Let me ask you, does Revelation chapter 12 tell us that this dragon beast represents the devil and Satan? Yes. The name Leviathan doesn't appear in Revelation 12 or Revelation 13 or in Revelation 17. But it has 7 heads. Leviathan has multiple heads. And it's called the serpent, the great dragon, and Satan. By the way, the Hebrew word Leviathan means twisted or coiled. In these passages, Leviathan is a deadly enemy of God and His people. As we can see in the book of Job. The book of Job is a typological description of what will happen to God's faithful remnant during the time of trouble. The whole story of Job is a type of the time of trouble that God's people are going to go through. Are God's people going to lose everything? Yes, they're going to lose everything. Except their faith. Except their faith in the Lord. Leviathan also is called in chapter 41 of Job, he is the king of the children of pride. Who is the king of the children of pride? The devil. And we are told also in chapter 41 of the book of Job, God will pull Leviathan from his natural habitat, cast him onto dry land, and crush its heads. So to speak, all the metals of Daniel 2 will be broken to smithereens. That's the other way of looking at it. Now, though the book of Revelation does not use the name Leviathan, it is clear that the dragon beast of Revelation 12 and the scarlet beast of Revelation 17 are Leviathan. All the details about Leviathan in the Old Testament coalesce in the portrait painted in Revelation. The dragon of Revelation 12 is defined as the dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, and Satan. By the way, what is the name that is given to the one who took everything from Job? Satan. Satan said to God, "Oh, of course Job serves you because you're good to him, because you bless him." So it's actually, Leviathan is also called Satan in the book of Job. The name Satan appears in Job to describe his persecutor. And in Isaiah 27 verse 1, Leviathan is called the dragon and the fleeting serpent. So if you put all these together, it's Satan, the dragon, the serpent. That's Revelation chapter 12. After the millennium, the kings of the earth will resurrect from their death wound. And that's literal death, by the way. And will persuade the kings of all human history and their waters or multitudes to attack his people in the city. True or false? True. You can read it there in Revelation 20 verse 5 and 7 through 9. At this point, Satan in person will ride the beast. No longer the harlot or the daughters. It's Satan in person. Now they can see him. Satan will entice the kings and the multitudes to surround the New Jerusalem. And they will be like the river Euphrates at flood stage. We don't have time to go to Psalm 46, where this imagery comes from. As the political and military leaders are ready to drown the city, God reveals to the multitudes that Satan is the great deceiver. And the kings and the multitudes who were unaware that Satan was using them by stealth from behind the scenes will turn against him. The waters are going to dry up on the leader. Before this, they were all of one mind, right? But now Babylon falls apart. As the kings turned against the harlot and her daughters before the millennium, the final drying up of the waters after the millennium will turn against Satan. Here's how Ellen White describes this moment. This is after the 1,000 years. All of the wicked have resurrected. All the military leaders, all the civil leaders, all the multitudes are gathered. And Satan says, I am the prince of this world. And those inside the city are usurpers. We are more than they. We can overcome the city. Do they buy into it? Oh, yeah, at first they buy into it. They organize. Ellen White says that the number of that host is greater than every soldier who has fought in every war in the history of planet Earth. I would say that that's a pretty good-sized army. And they're buying into him. Yeah, this is the prince. That city is ours. And so they're like the sand of the sea. They surround the city. But then God, above the city in panoramic view, shows the entire history of the world. Exactly like it happened. And for the first time, the civil rulers who helped the harlot in all of her stages, who persecuted God's people, they see that God's people were right and they were deceived by the religious leaders. And the religious leaders were deceived by Satan. And so now for the first time in human history, the civil rulers with their multitudes will turn away from God's people and the New Jerusalem, and they will say, so it was you. Is it important for the civil rulers to read the Bible? Yeah. To understand Revelation? It's vitally important for them to understand Revelation. If they did, they wouldn't make wrong decisions. Right? And so they say, it was you. We didn't have the foggiest idea. Of course, because they didn't read the Bible, they didn't know what was really happening. That Satan was working by stealth. And they will turn against him. She continues the statement. But of all the countless millions whom he has allured into rebellion, there are none now to acknowledge his supremacy. His power is at an end. What was his power? Using the leaders of the world to persecute, right? Now they dry up on him. Like the kings hated the harlot. She continues, the wicked are filled with the same hatred of God that inspires Satan. But they see that their case is hopeless, that they cannot prevail against Jehovah. Their rage is kindled against Satan and those who have been his agents in deception. And with the fury of demons, they turn upon them. You want to know the biblical description of this? You have to go to Ezekiel chapter 28 and verses 2 through 10, where it says that the wicked will unsheathe their swords and turn against Satan and his angels. This is the way in which they say, God was right and you, Satan, were wrong. This is the climax of the great controversy. They will kneel and say, true and just are your ways, O God. Every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That takes place after the millennium. Every knee in heaven, on earth, and under the earth will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And so ends the great controversy between good and evil. What an amazing story. Don't miss the next exciting episode tomorrow.